what we've seen, Pierre, is that the engagement spirals. Now, why is this? Ultimately, what we're seeing is that you get much more data on your customer, allowing you to build a more personalised approach because you understand how the customer is interacting with you. There's also an entirely different audience that's engaging with this. So to give you an idea, we find 50% of the audience engage with at least one of these engines.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Martin Collins, great to have you back here on the podcast, CBDO of the great Softabet. How are you doing, Martin?
I'm doing well, thanks, Pierre. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. You are, as we always say when you come on here, you're one of the OGs of the podcast, Martin. You were here when we did it live, where you reminded me back in the day.
Every time I come here now, I ask if it's live because of those first couple that we did.
I know. You were used to it back in the day, my friend. But I do think you are possibly the person who's been on the podcast more than anyone. I think you're at the lead right now. So,
okay, that's interesting.
Heavy title, yeah.
We'll need to keep that up.
Yeah. Lots of pressure on you here now to deliver, Martin. But we are discussing to redefine the North American online gambling experience today through new offers and products that are entering the US market. Obviously, we have our next New York show coming up here now on the 6th and 7th of March, to which Softabet is the headline partner here. And it's been quite interesting because I've been following Softabet for a number of years, and I've seen the incredible growth the company has had. And now you are taking on the big bear, the giant market of North America. Mm-hmm. So, Martin, just a first question to you is, if we just look at the North American market as it is today, what are kind of the current issues as you and Softabet sees it, and why have you decided to enter this market?
Okay, well, we're talking about North America, so let's first of all bring regulated Ontario into the equation. So in April, we will launch into Ontario with a GV agreement that we have. And we believe that makes a sensible first step in terms of operating in North America. When you go south of the border and you start looking at the States, I think there's sort of two key issues that need to be resolved at the moment. One of them is getting ROI from your marketing spend. If you look at New Jersey, there are 28, 29 operators there. And although the market is growing year on year, I think it was 10.9%, 22 into 23, there's still operators being added. And I'm not saying that there's not a market there, absolutely not. Otherwise, we wouldn't be entering into the New Jersey market. But it's incredibly competitive. And ultimately, getting the most ROI from your marketing spend is a key aspect to success. The barriers to entry in terms of cost far outweigh what you would generally experience in a regulated market in Europe. You need to do the market access deal, you need lawyers, you need different types of technology like geolocation that isn't pertinent within the European market. And all of these things add up. You need to host locally. And ultimately, all of this is eaten into your margin. So if you're not getting your optimum return from your marketing spend, then ultimately you're not performing because it's that competitive. So that's the first issue. The second issue for me as well is the fact that only 6 states have iCasino. I think this has been well documented. I believe at the moment there's 38 with sports, okay, but only 6 with casino. So this creates a problem because Obviously, sports, there's a level of uncertainty that comes with it. I noticed in the DraftKings report the other week that they took quite a hit in terms of sports results because the favourites won in the majority of parlayed matches that they had. So they took quite a big hit on that. So therefore, casino tends to allow you to level that sort of loss out on the sports side. And with it only being on the only being within 6 states, and we're not seeing the trajectory that we anticipated, then that creates some issues as well. Although I think we do have some positive news coming out of states like Maryland, Indiana, even maybe Illinois as well, that actually there's a possibility, and the big one, New York, right? Everybody's talking about that as well. So these are the two main challenges, in my opinion: getting the ROI from your marketing spend and making sure that you're competitive, and then let's say the lack of trajectory in terms of iCasino across the whole country and again, only being within 6 states.
Right, makes sense. Martin, you mentioned New York here as a possible state for online casino. We have Joseph Piadabo, the New York State Senator, who is thoroughly pushing for online casino, talking during the conference in a couple of weeks.
Well, this is the thing. These big states have such a deficit at the moment that they need to find revenue from somewhere. So it makes sense for them to be looking at this. But as an industry, and I mean online in particular, we need to take more responsibility for lobbying correctly. I think you and I have discussed before the potential cannibalization of lottery revenue, but we need to outline that actually it's not a cannibalization, it's an entirely different beast and an entirely different customer. And something that might help prove this is the E&K report from last week that spoke about retail cannibalization. You know, they outlined how actually it's a different customer for these retail players, and they're not cannibalising the existing customer base. And I think that's similar with regards to lottery. And if that can be proven and it can be delivered professionally and appropriately, then we might see the trajectory to start picking up a little bit.
Right, interesting perspective, Martin. And so you mentioned a couple of points here of current issues in the North American market. And how are SoftBet looking to address these issues now by entering North America? Okay,
so we operate a little bit differently from how other B2B providers might work. What we believe is that we want to create a proof of concept via B2C. Now, some people might turn around and say, well, you know what? I don't want to compete with my B2B provider. And you know what? There's something to be said for that. However, if asked the question, I would say, okay, but what's your biggest concerns or your biggest challenges at the moment with your B2B provider? The first one would generally be, you know what? They don't look at things from a B2C perspective. A B2B's objectives are very different from a B2C's objectives. What we're saying at SoftBet is that we're going to understand your challenges and what you're doing in order to help us to deliver from a B2B perspective, right? The second thing is obviously B2Bs often become bottlenecks for the growth of a B2C. So a B2C might want to invest in a particular project, but it doesn't align with a B2B's objectives themselves. What we are saying is that ultimately, because we understand the challenges in the market again, we will allow you, okay, via a dedicated team, via your own team, whatever it may be, to take the product in the direction that you see fit. And we will not become that bottleneck. So again, on the basis of the fact that we've gained understanding through the B2C, we're ultimately bringing new value. And this is ultimately the way that we see it, is that if we understand the challenges that you're facing every day with regards to ROI, with regards to conversions, with regards to localization of the product, because even in the States, state by state, the localization can be different with sports and even casino. You have to understand that. But with this knowledge, we can help you achieve your goals as a B2B.
Right. So essentially, you are not a pure B2B provider. You are looking to enter the market as a B2C with your own products to gain kind of market knowledge and to be closer to the customers and to get proof of concept. And then you are looking to roll out the products to your potential B2C customers. That's the idea, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at every time I speak to people about B2B in the States, they point out the obvious thing, that if you look at the top 2 or 3 operators in each state, they all have their own technology. Now, I think this is partly to do with the fact that the B2B approach is so broken, right? And what we're trying to do is to fix that in order to give a perspective that is very different from all of our competition.
Yeah.
So that when somebody looks at a possibility of a partner, they're looking at somebody that is clued in and understands the challenges that they're facing.
Yeah, yeah. And so I've watched the presentation by Yuri during G2E last year, where he talked about the importance of gamification in the products and so on. And I know that you're rolling out this mega product of yours that is specifically focusing on the motivational engineering and the gamification of products. And it looks the product looks it's first and foremost it's incredibly well developed. It looks fantastic. It looks like you're playing a tier one video game when you're looking at the product. But can you talk more about why gamification is so important in the products? Because the trend perhaps is moving somewhat in a different way. You could argue that kind of simplified UX UI experiences is what many operators are pushing for. But here we are talking about a more engaging and in-depth tool in gamification. Can you talk a little bit more about the thesis and the thoughts around this product development?
Okay, so MEGA, so motivational engineering gamification application. It's a mouthful, so we'll stick with MEGA, right? Just picking up on your point there. That's a really interesting point that you make with regards to simplified UI UX, okay, and then something like MEGA. I actually think that they can be that they're not in conflict with one another. In fact, if you have both, then actually you would have a greater ROI with regards to your marketing spend. But I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back to that. So ultimately what we've seen, and again, this comes down to our proof of concept model, right? Because what we have done is we've taken certain themes. So whether it's sports, whether it's casino, whether it's Colossus, whether it's Greece, whether it's Egypt, whatever the theme may be, we've taken several of them and we try to tie that to the brand. So if a brand has a Aztec feel, you'll have an Aztec gamification approach. If you go to Betinia, you'll see Colossus, okay, which is all about becoming the best sports person, the best sports bettor, and rewarding on the basis of your activity. You also have Stadium Builder. So obviously you can build stadiums on the basis of how you interact with the brand. And what we've seen, Pierre, is that the engagement spirals. Now, why is this? Ultimately, what we are seeing is that you get much more data on your customer, allowing you to build a more personalized approach because you understand how the customer is interacting with you. There's also an entirely different audience that's engaging with this. So to give you an idea, we find 50% of the audience engage with at least one of these engines. Okay, now by engine what I mean is that there's different gamification engines that we have. Some brands have multiple, some only have one, some might have 2 or 3, but 50% of your actives will engage with this gamification. And what happens is it dramatically increases screen time. So you mentioned Duri's speech, and I think the key takeaway from that G2E speech was that we're no longer competing with each other. Okay, what we're doing is we're actually competing with the likes of TikTok, with SnapFacts, with Instagram, with all of these new solutions that are coming out, with these new apps that are coming out. We're competing with these guys outside of the industry because we're competing for screen time. And we see a multiple of 4 when you have the right gamification and in front of the right audience. So let's take that back to what we were talking about. How does this impact the US? So we go back to our first issue that we spoke about with regards to ROI. Now, what's happening is, and I think it's been well documented, MGM spoke a lot about it probably about 18 months ago when they spoke about the proportion of bonusing and promotions that they had to deliver to their acquisition customers and also their retained customers. And it was ridiculous, and they rightly pointed out that this is not sustainable, and it's not sustainable even if you're trying to establish a market position. It's not sustainable. So the question is, how do you get more out of the customers that you've already acquired? And that's by creating a solution. And it can, from us, we can deliver bespoke solutions. We can take something off the shelf and rebrand it. Again, it's really important that it matches with your audience. And then what happens is it creates a level of engagement that ultimately drives your ROI. Now, it actually impacts twofold, because one, you don't need to spend as much on bonus and promotions, okay, because the customer's engaged with your brand, okay, which is a good thing as well, given the recent situation with Google and them dropping cookies, because brand equity is going to become an even more important factor moving forward. But secondly, it also drives them back into the gambling component of the solution, because once they have, let's say, utilised all their coins on the gamified piece, they're rewarded for that and brought back into the gambling piece. So it's kind of like a cycle that goes on and on. So if you have a football Sunday, okay, where everybody's sat at home in the States watching the American football, then these guys, what we would envisage, okay, is that their customers will be engaging with their website for that full period, because when the game's not on, when it's half time, etc., they'll be with the gamification component, and give them a much give their customers a much stronger feeling about their brand than they ever had previously. So they're not going to be jumping from one brand to the other constantly on the basis of bonus and promotions. It's no longer a race to the bottom. Yeah. So this is what we believe that Mega brings to the table.
Do you see any trends in the user database here of users who are incredibly keen to participate in these gamification type models, and other customers who are just looking to go on the website, place a bit as quick as possible, and then leave? Because you mentioned that this perhaps is not a niche product, that 50% of your users actually do engage with these models. But can you see a kind of clear divide there? Can you talk a little bit more about who this model caters for?
Yeah, I mean, it's casual gaming ultimately, right? This is when you get into the real guts of it. Okay, it's casual gaming. If you look at some of our more advanced solutions, it's casual gaming. But at the same token, we are rolling out a coin master type scenario at the moment, whereby you can steal coins from your friends. Right now, everybody kind of enjoys that type of aspect, right? We also have a monopoly solution. So the type of gamification will definitely always resonate with a particular audience, right? So there's no question about that it will resonate with a particular audience. Now, overall, we are seeing a 50% engagement, Pierre. Yep. So if you have 100,000 actives in a month, and 50,000 of them one way or another will engage with our gamification. But it really, you're asking, is there a defined difference? And I think the answer to that is no. I think it depends upon the audience and the type of gamification that we put in front of that particular customer. Yeah. And ultimately, the engagement that it will drive will be driven from the perspective of how that gamification resonates with the particular type of customer. So let's say, for example, that you're a softer brand. Okay, let's say that you're a softer brand, then running with something a little bit harder on gamification probably won't make any sense. Maybe something Monopoly style would be more interesting for you. Yeah. Okay, but if you are if you're a hard sports brand, then some of the gamification we have around Stadium Builder would be really interesting for you. One of the ideas that we had is that within each jurisdiction, we can create a city builder around the actual country itself. So if you have, let's say that you have 6 or 7 cities in a particular jurisdiction or country, that when you register, okay, you could automatically get your hometown, right? Yeah. But then as you grow, you can add others to your to-do list, and then ultimately get rewarded on the basis of them being delivered. So it's our job to build solutions that resonate more. Okay, but as I said, at the minute, we're seeing about 50%. So it's maybe not as scientific an answer as you would like, but I think that I genuinely think that the pertinence of the content itself, of the gamification content, will determine how successful it is. So that's a really important choice when you're going through that process. What gamification do you want? And listen, from what the feedback that we've had already from some customers just want one that they think will resonate with their brand and their audience, but some want all the gamification features so that they can pick up as much as possible. It's determined by your strategy ultimately.
Yeah. And you mentioned there are other features on the way as well, stealing coins and so on from other actual players. So this brings in a little bit of discussion around the social factor around these type of products. And the online gambling experience has inherently been a very lonely experience. It's you and the screen, and that's it. Whereas recently, several companies are propping up that are focusing on the social aspect and to bring that into our industry as well. Obviously, we saw Livespins being acquired by Evolution here a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
Good friends of ours that had a good day that day.
I saw him on my flight back from ICE. He looked delighted with himself.
Yeah, they were flying at the front of the plane. Yes,
they were indeed.
Yeah, and so my question to you as well then, Martin, is how important is the social component, do you think, moving forward when you're developing these products?
So I think with your traditional sports bettor, what I mean by traditional sports bettor is your 35 to 55-year-old guy who sat in the house trying to bet on his favourite sports team, watching the game whilst it goes. The social aspect to that individual probably isn't as pertinent as to the new wave of customers that are coming through. And the reason being is because that individual isn't socially native. I'm not socially native. Maybe you are. Maybe you just picked it up, Pierre. I'm not sure, right? But
I don't know.
But this new audience that's coming through are socially native, and they expect to have these solutions. If you go to any e-commerce site, if you go to any travel site, they have these aspects. They have gamification. They have elements of this. Now, it's relatively simple. Okay, maybe not as developed as what we've put together, but it's definitely it's a par for the course across all other verticals within online at the moment, and that's to cater for these socially native individuals. It's funny that I actually heard the other day that we're not allowed to call it social media anymore because it's actually just media. I think I'll always call it social media. But the point being is that these solutions cater for this new audience, and that's where ultimately the growth sits. So that it's definitely working with a new audience and giving you data points for all of your customer base. But you always have your exceptions as well. You have your 60-year-old guy that absolutely adores these types of things. So but yeah, I think ultimately it's catering for a new audience.
Right. And, we are talking about kind of redefining the North American online gambling experience through these new products that are quite different from what you can expect today from a tier 1 operator in the US if you want to place a bet or gamble online. And so the question is, are these products targeting kind of disruptor brands in the marketing that are trying to do things differently than the incumbents? Or do you think that there's also space for the incumbents to kind of take a leap of faith and try something different?
Okay, so nobody is performing in the US market the way they would like. Okay, in terms of making cold hard cash, I think that we just need to put that out there, right? So as a consequence, this is a functionality that will allow you to drive more value within your overall investment. So in answer to your question, I mean, you mentioned the challenger brands. So I saw an article last week by Peter Ekmark at Playstar, and he was talking about gamification. And he spoke about how he managed to drive more value from his customer base and get more value from his marketing spend with things like tournaments and rewards. And this is the type of thing that ultimately we have at our disposal. I believe it's a little bit more advanced in terms of the type of engagement that you'll get from the customer, given the casual gaming element that we're talking about. But ultimately, the situation is this, that this will resonate with any customer base, any audience, as long as it's built properly with that audience in mind. So if you are a FanDuel, if you're a DraftKings, if you're an MGM, and you want to get more ROI from your marketing spend. Sorry to quote Jason Robbins again, but for the first time ever in the report that they brought out the other week, he didn't just mention acquisition. Okay, he was talking about the uplift in performance, and he spoke about increased acquisition, but he also talked about retention and engagement. So this is at the forefront of everybody's mind. I mean, they bought Jackpocket last week. Right now, this is a softer product. Okay, it's a different audience, right? So it's clear to me that in order for them to start to be profitable and start to be EBITDA positive and cash flow positive, that they need to start thinking about things in different ways. And I can see it coming out of the press releases and the types of businesses that they're buying. Now, imagine that you have a product that ultimately impacts the customer's willingness to go to another brand and stay with you. This is ultimately what we're saying, Pierre. That's what it does. I'm not saying it will never happen. Of course it will, right? But what I'm saying is it drives better engagement with your brand. And that's becoming even more important, the way that online, the way that the industry, the way that the whole US ecosystem is evolving.
Right. I'm curious to know as well, Martin, you're the CBDO of SoftBet, and you are leading the commercial charge into the North American market now. It's a crowded space. There's many suppliers fighting for not that many operators. How do you plan to kind of bring SoftBet into the limelight in the North American market? How do you get through with your message to the operators that are perhaps functioning a little bit differently in the US to the European market?
It is very different, and it's a good question, Pierre. That how do you create a USP around our organisation? That's ultimately what you're asking me, and I think if you went to my team and you said, okay, what are we doing differently about this situation? You will get a categorical answer, I hope. I definitely hope, right? But I think you would get a categorical answer that we work in terms of ICPs, so ideal customer profiles. Every customer isn't our ideal customer, Pierre, and we're not ideal for every potential customer that comes in. So what we do is we create very specific profiles, 2-3 max, that ultimately would be a perfect customer for us. And what we're thinking about when we say ideal customer profile is where we can bring value and where we can show an upturn, where we can move the dial on behalf of that customer. That's really what we are focusing on. And you're right that there is a saturation against the opportunity at the moment, but that's partly to do with the fact that iCasino hasn't opened up, which I'm sure we'll come back to, right? That's the fact that iCasino is only in 6 states means that the opportunity is a little bit less than anticipated in 2018 when it was spoken about. So that's part of the factor. But yes, we have a platform. Yes, we're going to launch B2C, but genuinely, the opportunity for us lies with Mega. That's where the opportunity lies. We see us having a drastic impact on people's performance in particular states, operators' performance in particular states. We see us impacting that very positively, given the data that we have to hand. So that's really our USP going into the market, Pierre.
Right. And on the B2C front, so you are launching a B2C operation as well to produce proof of concept. But in order to produce proof of concept, you also need players, right?
Yes.
And same thing on the B2C front. It's a difficult and expensive market to operate in. How do you see? What ambitions do you have with the B2C operation? Is it purely proof of concept? Are you also looking to build liquidity? And perhaps do some positive turnover on the B2C front? And what's the strategy there?
We 100% don't believe in loss-leading products. Okay, whether it's B2B or B2C, nobody believes in that, right? Often if I hear that in a meeting, I'm perplexed a little bit. So it's not a case of going into the market and having this in order to grow B2B. It will be a concern in itself within New Jersey, and we will drive it in order to make cash. But the reason that we're doing that, again, going back to the original point, is so that we understand the challenges that our potential customers are facing. So we know traffic. I think if you went round the whole of the industry and said what is SoftBet best known for is understanding of traffic. We understand traffic. We know how to gain good traffic and we understand how to convert good traffic. So, but we've never operated in the States before, so this could be a different scenario.
Right.
So we need to understand the partners, we need to understand how we drive it through mobile apps. Mobile apps are still more important. It's resonating in Europe now, but it's still more important in states like New Jersey than it is in the majority of Europe. So these are things that we're going to have to learn. So in answer to your question, no, it's not going to be a loss leading project. Okay, it's more about identifying the challenges, but at the same time, trying to generate some revenue from it. I mean, that's ultimately why we're all here, right?
Yeah, that's it. You would hope so, at least in the long term. And so, Martin, when you look forward now into the North American markets, if you were to make some predictions in the next couple of years for the North American market, what would be your expectation now? Do you see potentially that we are just behind like a catch-up type effect and more states will open up for iCasino, for example? How do you envision SoftBet taking the space in this market, and just in general, what predictions do you have for North America?
I've been saying probably for the last 6 to 12 months that I see a second wave coming.
Yeah.
So, and I genuinely believe that, but I think it is directly tied to the two issues that we've spoken about. I think this is what everybody's looking at, that if Bet365, for example, are going to come into the market and they're going to invest a considerable amount, then they're going to want to see a particular ROI before they flick the trigger and go with that. Funnily enough, they're also operating very well in Ontario. So that's no coincidence, I don't think, right? So, but they need to be able to get a particular ROI and make it worthwhile for them investing into the market, because it's a considerable investment. The other issue that we spoke about, casino opening up in other markets. Now, for 365 and other big European brands, let's say, that want to go in there, I think that this is a vital component. As we spoke about earlier, if you don't have that revenue in order to cover sports results that you have no control over, then you could find yourself in trouble. I mean, we saw Kindred pull out, we saw MaximBet, there's been a few others that haven't quite worked out. So it's definitely a difficult market, there's no question about that. So I think the conditions need to be right in order for this second wave to happen. And I think it's tied to the ROI and to the casino component. I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I genuinely think these two aspects for me are ultimately what is going to define the market moving forward. What would I expect to see? I don't think that we're going to see in 24 months, I don't think we're going to see 38 states with iCasino. No. I think it's going to take longer than that. As I said, I don't quite think that we're lobbying properly at the moment. I think things are changing. I think I'm seeing improvement for sure. Yeah. The E&K report is a perfect example of that, right? But we still need to do better, and we probably need to do it as an industry rather than just have 2 or 3 operators driving it. We need to look at it as a whole. And as that opens up, then I think you'll see this second wave coming. But I think it will take probably 24, 36, 48 months. Yeah. We have massive issues with regards We have massive challenges with regards to the tribal situation in some of the states, like California, for example, Florida. I mean, these things have to be overcome. If they're not overcome, then it's difficult for a second wave to come through, because there's massive risk attached with everything that you're going to do. So I see it being a challenge for the second wave to come, but I don't think it's insurmountable, and I genuinely think that there's an appetite for it to happen. And actually, a competitive market is better for everybody, including the consumer. So, yeah, exactly. So that should drive some better ROI as a consequence. Yeah, exactly. In terms of SoftBet, I think we will launch into New Jersey Q1, Q2 next year. I think that's the plan. I think that, as I said, it's more about a proof of concept, although we do want it to be a profitable brand, no questions. I think that's really important to hit home. But I think that the mega component is ready now. The mega component is ready now. We don't need to wait for any ridiculous integration. We simply go onto the vendors list in a particular state, which from experience isn't too laborious a process. And then we can roll Mega out, and it's an entirely separate product from our B2C operation and from our platform situation, our platform offering. So it's a simple API that gives you access to all of the gamification. So that's where I see Softabet being most prominent over the coming months and years in the States.
Yeah. I think just to follow up on your argument there of the second wave eventually coming, I think you're absolutely right in that, Martin. And I think if we look at the North American market from the perspective of the major players that operate within it, obviously are highly motivated for this second wave to finally hit. The likes of DraftKings and the other major operators, ESPN, Fanatics, BetMGM, all of them, together with the kind of bigger umbrella organization under American Gaming Association that represents the entire gambling landscape in the US, are very powerful organizations we are talking about, right? And many of the operators are entering a more profitable stage in their companies' lives, which perhaps eventually will lead them to focus more operational efforts and investment into lobbying efforts, right? And you would imagine the incredibly big price that it would bring a company like DraftKings if a couple of more states would legalize iCasino, because at the end of the day, it is the casino product that will make these organizations really profitable. It will be a level change, right, when you introduce the casino product into more states. It's already proven through the American Gaming Association that that product in itself also generate a lot more taxes for the states than the sports betting product
Absolutely,
does.
yeah.
And in effect, then also more profits to the operators. So I would just imagine that the consortium of players coming together to target their lobbying efforts into a more specific and aligned strategy eventually, whether that takes 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, eventually there should be some form of catch-up effect where more states follow.
It's a cliche, Pierre, right, to say that we're stronger together. This is going back to the 1960s, right? We're stronger together, right? But no, you're absolutely right. If we can come together and we can work together in order to land the right message, and I think the message has been all wrong, in all honesty. Is you know me, traditionally I'm a sales guy, right? That's where I come from. And my job as a sales guy was always to land the right message with the customer. Okay, and this is the problem that we have with the States in the second wave, is that the right message hasn't been landed. And it's not been a unison message either. It's been one thing here, one thing there, one thing there. Let's come together and do it together, and we can accelerate this. I totally agree with you, no questions.
Yeah, brilliant. And as a final thing today, Martin, as well, I want to talk a little bit more about Softabet as well. I mean, the first time I was exposed to Softabet was the partners event, I think 2.5, 3 years ago. The company at that point was around 500 people strong. And the story that was told there, that partner event, was like a story of like huge growth. And every time I go to the partner event of Softabet each year, it is a continued story about exponential growth in the organization. And so I wanted just to check in with you. What have been driving this growth within the company in the last couple of years? You mentioned you are 1,600 people strong these days. It's a huge company that is just continuing to grow and grow and grow. What's the key to success there, would you say? Is it sustainable moving into the next couple of years?
I think genuinely the leadership. The majority of people listening to this will know Uri, and he is positively incessant.
Right.
And he has
incredibly passionate.
No, absolutely, and an eye for detail that you might not anticipate. He has an eye for detail that really helps you quickly get through bumps in the road that might take longer elsewhere. And that's the thing, when you experience a bump in the road, it's dealt with. So this leads to growth, and I think the biggest sort of cultural aspect that I can point to, and this is my own words, so if it doesn't make sense, then please allow me to elaborate. But ultimately, it's the business is opportunity driven. So if something presents itself, we look at it, we try and identify the synergies and the possibility, and if we agree with it, we run with it. this is really important. There's obviously a bit of risk management in terms of looking at it, but ultimately, if we believe it's right for us, if we like the synergies, then we will make it happen, and we'll do everything that we can in order to make that happen. There's never a, okay, wait a minute, we can't do that. It's like, okay, let's do that, and then let's understand the impact that it's going to have, and then work it into what we're going to deliver. And you know what, we do have a big technical team, which is fantastic to have. I talked about delivering customers dedicated teams, depending upon the scenario, but genuinely, if we want to prioritize something, then it can be done, given the sheer mass of technical talent that we have. So this willingness to not give up on something because it might be a challenge is really at the forefront of the success and the growth that Uri and the overall business is created. It's really incredible. I'm 4 months in, and if you'd asked me 4 months before, if you'd asked me before I'd gone, I didn't quite see it like this. Right. But genuinely, it's a business that, you know, is driven, is enthusiastic. Before we came on air, I also mentioned the story of the 400 developers and staff that were in Ukraine.
Tell it.
So prior to 2022, when the war kicked off in Ukraine, our business the headquarters was in Kiev, and the business was experiencing some issues, not just from a political perspective, but corruption, etc. And we decided as an organisation that we're going to move absolutely everybody to Cyprus, because we wanted to make them feel safer. We wanted to work in an environment where the growth that we were striving for was achieved. And Uri and the organisation relocated 400 people from Ukraine to Cyprus. Right. Now in itself, when you just say 400 people, it sounds a lot. But imagine cats, dogs. I've heard about a horse that actually moved as well from Ukraine to Cyprus. And what you see is, and this is what maybe you don't get in other organisations, is that when you speak to people who were one of those 400, the majority of which are still with the business, but when you speak to these guys, they're so bought in. You know, you ask any founder or C-level what their biggest challenge is, they will say, getting my team to care as much as I do.
Right.
This has been achieved within Softabet, and it rubs off on everybody else around the organisation. Wow. So when you need that person to do that extra hour, they do it because they've already been invested in, and that in itself is something very unique. I mean, I said to you that I'm always looking for a purpose. Yeah. You know, I went to the 8th birthday party in Dubai, and Oksana, our CMO, delivered this message, this speech around this story, and I instantly said, that's my purpose. I knew exactly what it was. I knew exactly what it was. So fantastic. So that's where it comes from, really. And just a funny little anecdote, that when we moved from Ukraine to Cyprus, Cyprus wasn't really built at that time for like large office space and a lot of people within one space. So we ended up taking a children's play area, but you know, a play area on steroids, you know, over 5 floors, you know, different themes throughout the floor. And when we moved in, we went into one of these rooms in the back, and we discovered, I think it was 6 or 7 of the crab machines, you know, to grab the soft toys. Yep. And that's where the idea for Cash Crab and Bonus Crab stemmed from. Right. So you know, everything it's a nice way to finish our conversation. I think that, you know, after Uri doing that for the organisation, for all the people, we have something that is really tangible now from that experience that all our customers can take advantage of. So
yeah, it was a good quote by Mark Cuban during in the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and he said that how organizations act today will define them for the next decade, right? And what did some organizations, how did they act at that time? Some organizations choose to immediately cut costs and without much emotion and feeling let go of a lot of people. Others, like Softabet, by the sounds of it, during the outbreak of the war here, is similar situation, right? It's they choose to safeguard the employees and they show them their human side first and foremost. Yep. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's through that authenticity about proving that the company is more than just an employer where you clock in and clock out. Here you work together and for the benefit of everyone. It generates some next level purpose for going into the office and wanting the company to do well.
I totally agree, and I don't know if you've heard the story of Nintendo before, Pierre.
I don't think so.
Okay, so the CEO of Nintendo, he died relatively recently, a few years ago, but he died, and I think it was in 2008 or at some other financial crisis. Obviously, they're a publicly listed organisation, and they came to him, the board came to him, the shareholders came to him and said, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to cut costs and get rid of all these people? And he said, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. And they were like, why? And he said, well, in 5 years' time, when you want growth, okay, these people will no longer be with the organisation building the best games in the world.
Yeah.
So do you want to let them go and take that risk for that time now? And you know what? They backed him, to be fair. Yeah. And he took I think he took half a pay cut along with all of his leadership team. And they rode it out for a couple of years and then came back even stronger. So these examples of solidarity within organisations, it defines them and it gives them longevity. So I 100% agree.
Yeah. And I do like you were sporting his Super Mario hat there as well. I hope we'll see that once again, by the way.
I'm not so sure about that, as long as I don't get made into a character.
Martin, it's been fantastic. I'm looking forward to see you over in New York as well for the next New York Summit here, 6th, 7th of March, where we are really excited and happy to have Softabet, of course, as the headline partner to that event. Really excited to hear more about the products over at the show. But for now, enjoy the tour that you have in front of you in Latin America, and I'll see you over in the States.
No, thank you, Pierre. We're really looking forward to be the headline sponsor there as well, and I'm really looking forward to an excellent event. So thank you, and thanks for today. It's been great.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin.
Cheers, Pierre. Thanks.